college, and he is a man of ideas, so he keeps on introducing new ideas into whatever educational field he chooses. I know him since long, 27 years now, and as he was the professor. When I met you, you were a professor or associate professor
I
of,
don't know.
I do remember,
I
of theoretical
काहीतरी होतं,
astrophysics.
huh?
काहीतरी
I was
होतं.
something.
Because I remember Professor Chitri distinctly introducing us. He is our associate professor of theoretical astrophysics. So I do remember that.
Okay.
And Mayank has worked on many projects. At TIFR, he was working on space-based telescopes, and they were flown on NASA Space Shuttle. He has also worked on a Russian satellite and several Indian satellites. I think you kept going to Uttarakhand for many visits, right?
Bangalore and
Bangalore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sriharikota.
So, and when he was deep into astrophysics, he suddenly developed interest in the history of astronomy and science in ancient civilizations. That's why he is now a proper authority to speak about Jyotish, which is which is projected as a science. Why it is not a science, we are going to see. So I am not going to talk much about it. But with all this, he has always been keen on student training. He has initiated Astronomy Olympiad program. He was also part of the Physics Olympiad for a while. He was also heading the Physics Teachers Association for a while, and he enthused many physics teachers. And we are very happy to have Mayank with us on InstaSend platform. He has added like some 4 stars to InstaSend programs. Thank you, Mayank, for being with us, and thank you very much for accepting this invitation. This is a controversial subject, and because of what happened recently, IGNOU started, I think, MA in Jyotish Vidya. They themselves are not calling it science, not Shastra, but or Vigyan, but Vidya. Let's see what comes of it. Well, with whatever is happening around us in the main seat of power of this country, these things are expected, but that it doesn't stop us from knowing what is the truth. So to let you know what is astronomy and what is astrology, what are the differences, and which is science and which is not science, and why one should study astronomy and just leave astrology, all these things in a very structured manner, Mayank is going to give you. Thank you, Mayank, and the floor is yours.
Please don't believe even half of the
No. Please believe in everything. Don't believe in astrology. Believe in what I'm saying about Professor Vahia.
Believe me, I wish I was as good. Anyway, so let us start with this discussion on astrology. Mugdha has been she has worked very hard on this lecture, as hard as I have, which is that she has translated every sentence that I have put in into Marathi. And the last one she translated 5 minutes ago. So for every English slide that I show, I will also show you the Marathi slide, but I won't read it and I won't go through it. But for those of you who find it easier to read my slides in Marathi, we also have Marathi slides. So with every English slide, there will be a Marathi slide. But I won't read it. I will continue to speak. And I hope really that the rhythm works. So we are going to talk about astrology, and my contention is not now, not ever. It should not be a serious subject, and I will argue as to why it should not be. On the other hand, astronomy, of course, is a very fascinating subject of how the universe works and what are the components and constituents of the universe, and that makes a very fascinating scientific story. Astrology does not, and that is a point that I want to make. So I'm going to talk about why astrology does not make science. Make not just not make science, but it should be aggressively opposed and not included in our curriculum, and that's the point I want to make. So amongst everything that various governments have introduced, studies of ancient Indian sciences is fine, but astrology should be particularly singled out for resistance because it should not be included, and I'll come to the reasons why. So the first question, of course, is why are people interested in astrology? The first and foremost reason I think is that we are all scared of our future. What will happen? When will it happen? How will it happen? Will I get admission in the college I want or not? Will I get the degree that of the kind that I want? Will I get the job I want? Will I get lots of money? Will I get when will I die? When will I get married? All kinds of questions come to our mind, and we are always scared about what happens next. So it is natural for us to try and see if we can find some answers beforehand about these deep desire, these deep anxieties of ours. And whenever there are vulnerabilities, you can imagine there'll be people who will try and who will try and take advantage of that vulnerability of people. So we want to know our future, and if, especially if there are bad elements into the future, we want to know how to mitigate them, whether we can bribe the gods into changing the way things are going to happen to us. And that is the primary reason, vulnerability that we all have. And as long as there are vulnerable people, there will be charlatans who will try and exploit that for their own purpose. And people will, so the idea is that if you can convince people that you can predict their future and help them change it, then there is a lot of money in it that they will give you. And you have all kinds of superstitious people around, even amongst public figures and so on, who are so scared of their future that they would accept any kind of guesswork, any kind of sweet talking, as long as it suits their feelings. So they are called soothsayers actually originally. Now they are called astrologers and all that, but they are essentially soothsayers. Don't worry, your future is bright. I can see how good your future is, and it will always be wonderful. But there will be a problem. You pay me so much money, and I will make sure that that problem doesn't occur, and so on and so forth. So as long as there are people who are, as long as we feel vulnerable, and we all feel vulnerable in this complex, complicated world, and there'll be people who will take advantage of it and try and see if they can make some quick money out of it. And that is what Jyotish Shastra essentially does, which is to play on your vulnerabilities, do some soothsaying, and convince you that they can predict your future and change your future as the need be. So, what is astrology? Astrology is a system that claims to be able to predict predict the future. So, what they do is they look at the location of planets with respect to stars at different times, and based on that, they claim they will be able to tell your future. And there are multiple versions of it. One is, of course, the sun's location. So the so-called sun signs or solar astrology, and then moon's position is lunar astrology. So Chandra Rashi and Saurya Rashi are two very common ways of doing astrology. So you, but because Saurya Rashi is predictable, because the sun moves very predictably and very easily and over slow gradual period, it's easier to sort of go on predict on solar Rashi, simply because the time is convenient. Moon's Rashi, on the other hand, changes practically every day, and therefore you have to know exactly your date to know where the moon is to be able to convert. So newspapers, etc., thrive on this sun signs, but there are people who would take moon signs also into consideration. And the more elaborate Jyotish actually work even harder, and they include planetary positions also. And we will see how they do all this in order to convince us that they can predict our future, and they can help us change it wherever things are likely to be in trouble. So what does Indian literature have to say about astrology? It is generally considered ancient science in India, etc. Um, and when you look back, Atharva Ved is the earliest text, dated to about second millennium BC, 1000 and 2000 BC, probably more like 1200 BC or so, where for the first time you get these omens, where you can address your anxieties, and you can make you can put curses on your opponents, or you can try and help your neighbors and so on. So there are spells for removing illnesses, there are spells for removing um, uh, some demons, there are spells for removing troubles that are there in your life, but they are essentially spells conduct for specific kind of event. It is not it doesn't say that your future is going to be like this, and this is how it is going to happen, and certainly does not relate to planets. So these are all small attempts at giving curses or something, but that is really in no way connected with the astrology the way we talk about it today. So Atharvaveda is the earliest text that describes omens and how to avoid omens and all that. And they essentially talk about what procedures you should follow, what time you should do, what rituals, etc., to help you um, with your little melodies here and there. But they are not astrological in any sense of the word. Generally, when people have to throw words about astrology, they talk about Vedang Jyotish, and they talk about Surya Siddhanta and claim that astrology comes from there. And I will show you that neither Vedang Jyotish nor Surya Siddhanta have anything to do with astrology. Vedang Jyotish is the earliest text of astronomy. By definition, it's an auxiliary text to Vedas, and so it is called Vedanga Jyotish, and it is got to do with Jyotisha. Now, the word Jyoti is the critical word in Jyotisha. Jyoti means light, and so stars are called Jyotishas in astronomy. And what Jyotisha does, Vedang Jyotish does, is to worry about this movement of stars and their related issues. It mentions events that occurred in 2900 BC, 2300 BC, 1660 BC, and all that. But the general date assigned to Vedang Jyotish is 1370 BC, which is a little after Rigved and Yajurved, but earlier than some of the later Vedas, Samhitas. The book is completely astronomical. The whole idea is that they want to know when a year happens. Now, Indian calendars conventionally have been lunar, but the moon goes around the earth once in 29 and a half days, which means that essentially in about 360 days it completes one circle, or 12 full moons. By that time the sun has nearly returned to where it should be, but there is 354 days the moon completes the rotation, so there are 11-day gap. And Vedang Jyotish is worried about how to make sure fill up this 11-day gap so that you have a synchronization of lunar and solar calendars. So what they do is come out with this idea that let us not have 1 year of 365 days, but let us have 1 year of 1830 days. Now 1830 days, of course, is 5 years. With each day of 366, with each year of 366 days. So 1 year of 360 days, 1830 days will give you 5 years. And the idea is that you will still overshoot a little, so you correct by looking at the full moon, etc. By observationally, you tune in the final thing. But the idea is to have a 5-year period, and that is called the yuga. And that word yuga stays. So if somebody passes away, and if you go to a Brahmin and say, I want to do the ceremonies of it, they generally recommend that you should continue to do it for 5 years, because at the end of the yuga is really when the complete calendrical transfer of the dead soul has happened. And within that 5 years, the 2 Adhik masses are added, 2 additional lunar months are added, so that the solar and lunar months synchronize. And in fact, we talk about these yugas of very long period of millions of years, actually is a very peculiar misrepresentation of this yuga, where 1 day is considered not 1 day of the sun, but 1 day of the year. 1 year is converted into days, and there's a multiplicative effect of 365, which magnifies this yuga into the large numbers of millions of years. But original idea of yuga, which is there in Vedang Jyotish, essentially says that you have to how do you synchronize the solar and lunar calendars. It vaguely mentions Bruhaspati, but it is not even sure that it mentions planets, and it has no reference to planets at all. It has very elaborate procedures to calculate the time of a ritual, etc., which was the preoccupation of Vedic people. And the word Veda, it uses Jyotisha in the sense of astronomy only, and its primary obsession is timekeeping and calendars. There are no rashis, there are no nakshatras, and there is no planets. Nakshatras are there, but there are no rashis and there are no planets. And that is obviously means that all the major component of modern day astrology are not there in Vedang Jyotish. So Vedang Jyotish is simply, there is no question of anything near astrology in Vedang Jyotish. It is just how to synchronize years and how to synchronize solar and lunar calendars and how to calculate the exact time for conducting a particular ritual. It has nothing else in it. And if you want, Indian National Science Academy has brought out a critical edition of Vedang Jyotish in English with original Sanskrit in it, and you can read it to see that there is absolutely no question of astrology in it. The other document that is so that is about Vedang Jyotish, purely preoccupied with measurement of time, purely preoccupied with getting the correct time for various events and all that. So for daytime, they actually recommend that you use this vessel of a particular dimension filled with water, in which you put a smaller vessel with a little hole in it, so that it fills up in a certain amount of time. And so at daytime, they give you advice on how to measure time with respect to sun, not just the location of the sun, but also in a more precise manner. But essentially, it is preoccupied with time, calendar, and time, and that's all that it does. There are no planets, there are no rashis, and there's obviously no astronomy. Surya Siddhanta is the other document that is often mentioned, and Surya Siddhanta is mentioned in, for example, Panchangas, for making Panchangas, and I will talk about Panchangas in a minute. So Surya Siddhanta is a Sanskrit treatise of Indian astronomy of 14 chapters. Surya Siddhanta describes how to calculate the motion of various planets and moon relative to the various constellations, and calculate the orbits of various astronomical bodies. Surya Siddhanta is fairly recent, in the sense 15th century. Aryabhatta was 5th century, this is 15th century, where the retrograde motion and the changing speeds of planets and the sun and all that is very well studied. The earliest text we have for Vedang Jyotish is 15th century, but it is probably dated to 8th century. But the most oldest manuscript that we have is 15th century. Panchanga makers claim to base their Panchangas on calculation of Surya Siddhanta. And this can only be partly true. Because and this can only be partly true because the formulas that are given in Vedang Jyotish do talk about the movement of sun and moon and the planets, etc. But it misses out one very vital point, which is the precession of the earth. And because of the precession of the earth, which is quite significant over periods of years, essentially Vedang Jyotish calculations or any formula that you give at any given time would be correct for a few hundred years, and then it will drift from reality. Because of the precession of the earth, the values will keep changing. And therefore, if you want to use Surya Siddhanta composition, you actually have to add some additional terms in order to make it relevant to the current times. And we have done this, we have checked this essentially by looking at when eclipses occur and when where the Surya Siddhanta predicts full new moon or not, and so on. And you can show that for 400-500 years it is good, but then it drifts away. So any calculation today done entirely on the basis of the formula given in Surya Siddhanta along with the tables, etc., will not be valid. And so even though Panchang makers will write at the beginning of the book saying that they have based their calculation on Surya Siddhanta, they have not. The second point is that Surya Siddhanta does not talk in of astrology in any sense of the word. It is only focused on planetary motions, calculation of planetary motions, purely as an academic exercise about how to get your timings and everything correct. But there is absolutely no discussion. There are, for example, there are tribes in India who believe that the best time for marriage is the conjunction of Mars and Venus. Now, if you want to know the conjunction of Mars and Venus well in advance, Surya Siddhanta will tell you that. And those kind of things. So it gives you planetary locations. It gives you planetary locations with respect to constellations and so on. So in some sense, it is like a modern almanac, except that in the modern almanac, all numbers are properly printed out. Here they are given in the form of formula, and you calculate at the time you want. Surya Siddhanta does only that, and is of great interest to astronomers who are interested in knowing the location of stars, etc., but is not connected to astrology. Surya Siddhanta, in no sense of the word, talks of predicting human future based on that. The third entity that is generally given a bad name in the context of astrology is to say Panchanga gives you astrology. Again, Panchanga does not give you astrology. Panchang is a very scientific document that does not in any sense of the word talk about predicting future from astronomical events. Panchanga talks about when the rains will come, when which season will come, when which festival will come, when do you fast for a particular reason, and so on. but it does not talk about predicting future at all. You can go through Panchanga edge to edge. If a genuine Panchang will only tell you dates. So Panchangas are highly scientific and involves using mathematics and spherical trigonometry. And anybody can write a program to calculate Panchanga. That is not an issue. While originally following Surya Siddhanta, the precession of equinoxes means that those formula are no longer correct. So if you today make a calculation and make a Panchang based entirely on Surya Siddhanta alone, you will definitely get it wrong by significant amount actually. And therefore, what astrologers they do is they tell you that it is based on Surya Siddhanta, which is a very vague statement. What the government of India has done is that the Indian Statistical Institute has been given the responsibility of creating an Indian astronomical almanac, where they give the positions of every star and every stars and every planet as a function of time for the entire year. So it's a thick book that gives you, I think, every minute wise or few minute wise location of every planet in the sky. And some Jyotishs use that directly without talking about it. And there are some who try to modify the Surya Siddhanta they have, those formula to give you the same numbers as those are there in the almanac. So there is a fudging there. You either fudge or you simply copy, or there are some who would do a hybrid, and some who would in fact insist on going by whatever their elders told them, and in most of those cases they get it wrong. Only those who copy directly from the almanac get it right, and they are certainly not using Surya Siddhanta. Because Surya Siddhanta worked very well for about 500 years after it was made, but then has drifted away. So when the Panchang makers tell you about using Surya Siddhanta, they are actually fudging. Panchangas are made today by a different set of methods, and Surya Siddhanta again should not be blamed for astrology, because Surya Siddhanta itself does not even talk about predicting future using these documents. So what are the contents of Panchanga? Panchanga by definition is Panch Anga. There are 5 elements to it. And those 5 elements are the Tithi, the place where the moon is. The difference between the sun and the moon, whether it is full moon, new moon, so on. Nakshatra in which the moon is sitting. The yoga, the angular relationship between the sun and the moon, and the apparent location of the moon plus the apparent location of the sun, because it is 13.5 degrees, so it gives you the width of a Rashi. And then there is Karana, which is half Tithi, because you want to have a high degree of precision and so on. And then Vara. And there has been controversy whether it should be Vara or whether it should be Rashi and so on. But basically, Panchang consists of 5 elements. And it is only, okay, so if you look at a Panchang and open a Panchang and see page of a Panchang, you will see that it only mentions these details. It may mention it in some of the modern Panchang makers present it in the form of a Kundli related issues, and I will come to how Kundlis are made to convince you that Panchanga se Kundli banana is still scientific. Interpreting them is where the diciness comes. So Panchanga essentially, like I said, consists of 5 elements of Var, Karana, Yoga, Nakshatra and Tithi, and then that is all that it consists of. And you can present it in various ways, but that is all Panchang. It is a 5 arms of astronomical calculations which are used in daily purpose for deciding various festivals and times of various pujas and so on. So Panchanga has the data that is used to identify location of each of the 9 planets. And as long as that goes, it is accurate. But remember that 4 of the 9 planets are not even planets. Sun is not a planet, Moon is not a planet, Rahu is not a planet, and Ketu is not a planet. Rahu and Ketus are points in the sky where the orbit of the Sun and the Moon meet each other. And it has importance in terms of eclipses and stuff like that. So Panchanga gives you that Rahu and Ketu. But it gives you the locations of 9 planets, and on the basis of that, if you look at the Panchang, you can predict when the next eclipse is going to be and all that. Astrologers use Panchanga to claim that a particular combination of location of planet affects your life. And that is where the whole thing is messy, and the whole thing is not true. So till the Panchang level, till the Surya Siddhanta, till the Vedang Jyotish, things are fairly scientific. It is when you claim that Panchanga tells you your future and your fate that things become really, really dicey. And I will show you how dicey they become. There are multiple issues. So if you go from Panchanga to Panchanga, there will be variation. If you look at the Panchanga published in Gujarat, it will be different from the one in Maharashtra, which will be different from one in South India, and so on. Because each Panchang maker now realizes that Surya Siddhanta doesn't work, some then go for corrections as given by their elders, some go by a hybrid variety to try and fit the almanac data, or some use almanac out of the way. So for the same date and time, different almanacs will give, different Panchangas will give you different dates, different location of planets. And that obviously is dicey, because if your fate depends on where the planet is, and if your Panchanga is giving you the wrong location of the planet, your predictions are going to be completely haywire. Up to, like I said, up to Panchang making, up to Surya Siddhanta formulation, and up to Vedang Jyotish, you are doing all right. And because Panchang simply calculates the location of planets and sun and moon, you can have a computerized. So when you talk about computerized astrology, essentially what they are doing is using computers to calculate the location of planets at any given time. And that is scientific. But beyond that, the so-called astrologers, or even the so-called computerized astrologers, are then use a whole bunch of arbitrary rules about saying that if the planet A is close to planet B, or if planet A is in opposition to planet B, this is the fate that will happen, that is the fate that will happen, which is essentially just typed in by somebody else, which is vomited out by the computer. The computer is not doing fortune telling in any sense of the word. The computer simply looks at what ephemeris must have told you, what it tells you about the planet. And then somewhere there is a lookup table put in by the astrologers, which says that if you see these planets in this combination, claim that this is going to be good, or this is going to be bad, or whatever it is. Computers are not astrology is not a science, and definitely it is not programmable, because there is a lot of simple arbitrary association of reality with planetary positions, and that is completely arbitrary, and I will show you how it works. So for example, there are people who tell you about the Kundali of Rama. First, at the time of Rama's, nobody knew of Rashis, and nobody knew of planets. There's absolutely no evidence that at the time of Ramayana anything was known. So there's no question of having made a Kundali of Rama at that time. In order to convince people of the Kundali of Rama, people have now created Kundali of Rama based on whatever they think is the date of Ramayana. And in fact, many of them are clownish in the sense that they are physically impossible. In the sense that they would claim that Venus will be in opposition to Sun, when Venus can never be in opposition to Sun. So there are lots of errors in these kind of Kundali making, which are done post facto. And there is a lot of humbug that goes on in trying to convince us that astrology makes sense. It does not make sense. Even more amusingly, astrology is not Indian. We had, like I said, Vedang Joshi 1300 BC. We had Surya Siddhanta 1500 AD, 1000 years after Aryabhat. And we have modern Panchang. If astrology was an Indian knowledge system, all these three, at least Surya Siddhanta and Panchang makers, would have had a section on predicting futures. Astrology is not an Indian subject, and I will show it to you by some evidence. It comes to India through the Greeks. So Yavana Siddhantika is something that I think Varamira writes. And that for the first time, they talk about using astronomy for astrological purposes. And they just noted that they do that and leave it at that. It comes around 2nd century. In the 2nd century BC, the Indo-Greek kingdom came all the way to Afghanistan and then northern Pakistan. And they stayed there till about 10th century AD before they retreated completely. Yavana Jataka is dated to 120 CE. So that is when that that idea that Yavanas use astronomy for astrology comes, but it is just noted as something of amusement. So the first beginning of astrology in India comes around that time. The proof that even in 500 BC, this is not the 500 AD, this is not considered serious at all, or an honorable profession at all. It can be seen from the fact that even in 5th century AD, when they defined the syllabus for astronomy as to who can be an astronomer, They do not include astrology. And I'll just show you the syllabus for an astronomer as defined by Varamira in 500 AD. He says an astronomer should be able to tell you the time division. Yuga, year, solstices, seasons, month, fortnight, day, time, Yama, which is 90 minutes, Mahurata, which is 48 minutes, Nadi, Prana, and some are smaller time units. You should be able to tell Sutra, Saura, planetary calendar about which planet is where at any given time. You should be able to tell the Savana, which is terrestrial calendar. You should be able to understand solstices. Now, these are terms which are classically astronomical and classically scientific. Only I don't have time to go into the details of what each of these terms mean and what is the subtle difference between terrestrial time and solstices and stuff like that. You should be able to calculate eclipses. You should be able to calculate sun's daily and annual motion, because you need to be able to predict time. You should be able to calculate the longitude and latitude of a place, starting with Ujjain as 0 longitude. Ujjain was 0 longitude for a long time. From here it went to Paris, and today of course it is in Greenwich. But according to Varamira, a good astronomer should be able to calculate the latitude and longitude of place. And they should be able to understand zodiacs and nakshatras and show them in the skies, not just on the textbook. Zodiacs and nakshatras in the sky, they should be able to show in the sky, and they should be able to teach this to a smart student. Nowhere does Varamira say that you should be able to predict the future of a person based on these situations. It is very careful. All revered Indian astronomers, scholars from historical and early times have all been very conscious of not including astrology in our knowledge system. It is a creation of charlatans, maybe 13th century, maybe 14th century, but even 15th century Surya Siddhanta, which is an honorable text, does not talk of in any way predicting future using astrological means. Astrology literature is a parallel literature created simply for playing on our anxieties and our uncertainties. So that is what I said. Varamira writes down who is an astronomer and what should an astronomer know, and in that he lists out the whole details of subject that he should know about. But astrology is not one of them, because astrology is not considered respectable in classical Indian literature. It is an entirely parallel set of documentation that has been created for, according to me, nefarious purposes of exploiting people's anxieties and vulnerabilities. So how do they use astronomy? The first thing is that astronomy is a cunning mix of true astronomical data about the movement of the sun and the moon. So they use Uttarayan and Dakshinayan, which incidentally are also the way they use it is wrong. They still claim Uttarayan as 14 January when it is in fact it is now 21st December. And Dakshinayan they claim in August is now in July, rather June end. So there are simply by using a Sanskrit word, you should not get carried away. I don't know if you have remember, but there's a very famous movie called Guide by Devanand, in which these priests come and see him, tell him that you are not a priest because you cannot speak Sanskrit, and they speak a few words in Sanskrit which are rather straightforward. And in turn, Devanand goes back and says, I can speak English which you can't speak, so I am a great Rishi Muni of English. Just because somebody speaks a few Sanskrit words, don't get carried away. Sanskrit words are not that difficult to pick up. So I can throw words like Uttara and Nakshina, and I can talk about the Sanskrit name for planets and stuff like that, but that does not mean that I'm referring to classical Sanskrit literature. Classical Sanskrit literature of honorable scientists of the past have all shunned astrology. So when you talk about Varamira and etc., they do not use their knowledge for astrological purposes. Astrologers, like I said, mix their limited vocabulary of Sanskrit and claim to talk about the ancient Indian documents in which they claim to have read and which they claim to be following to predict your future. They are not. They are simple, straightforward charlatans. So what do the astrologers do? They make astral charts. They make kundalis and stuff like that. So what is this? So they divide the sky into 12 zodiacal signs, as straightforward as it can be. They then take the date and time of your birth and your location, and then they tell you the location of Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu to give you the Navagraha, and they tell you where those grahas were in which constellation at that time, which is perfectly scientific. So so for example, even in writing kundlis, on the left, what you have is the Western method of doing it, which is circular. In South India, they use square kundalis, and in North India, including Maharashtra, they use this diagonal kundali. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are the 12 houses. They don't call it zodiac in South India. They explicitly call it zodiac, and the Western astrology also explicitly calls it zodiac. And essentially, what they do is they write down where each planet was. To that sense, anybody can do that. Even a computer can do that. You can program a computer to do that. So essentially, like I said, what astrologers do is to write down all the constellations, write down the 12 zodiacal signs, and write down which planet, which of the 9 planets was where at the time of your birth. And there also there are problems, and I will come to that in a minute. And then they put it in this fancy looking painting, and they tell you that if a particular planet which is supposed to be good or which is supposed to be bad is in house number 1, then it will affect your health and well-being and so on. So then there is this, and this is where the lies come in. This is where a smart speaker talking nonsense comes in. And this is where it completely dissociates itself from any honorable knowledge system. This is where the transition happens from astronomy to astrology. And this is where you should worry about being conned by somebody who is good at speaking, probably knows a few Sanskrit words, has heard of Surya Siddhanta, but definitely has not read it. And there is no way he can write down a decent equation from Surya Siddhanta to calculate the location of sun or moon. But this is their workhorse. And you can even see within these two systems that I have of South India and North India, the same house has different relations, different entities of importance. So while house number 1 says appearance of health and well-being in the North Indian astrology, itself self-appearance, body, and path through life, etc. So they also talk about long-term life. Similarly, for example, number 12 talks about enlightenment, spirituality, etc., aestheticism and all. While number 12 also talks about loss and your travel in the world and so on and so forth. So if there is a planet there which is supposed to be good, then 12, then North Indian will tell you that you will travel a lot and see the world. While a South Indian astrologer will tell you that you will probably have a lot of work in hospitals and you might even face imprisonment and all that. And you can immediately see the contrast between the two. The same houses, the same planets, if they are read by a North Indian astrologer, they'll be read differently than what is read by a South Indian astrologer. Clearly, this cannot be true. I cannot simultaneously be a traveler of the world and also be continuously in hospitalized and prisons. And so on and so on. You can compare one to one, point to point, and you will see that these things are a mess. But even then, so just to give you an example about how these things are a mess. Initial words in each case compare, but when you look at the later words, clearly there is a mess. So for example, point number 10 says karma, vocation, eminence, and character. 10 says career, success, fame, and reputation. So you would think at the beginning it compares, but then the words like father and visible action, etc., come in, where the astrologer can spin a web and confuse you and convince you that he knows what he's talking about, when in fact he is not. So what are the problems? The first is method of locating planets is not accurate. Different schools of astrology will have different ways of calculating, and therefore they will give you planetary locations which are often blatantly wrong. And like I said, when kundlis of Ram, etc., are made, they are blatantly impossible. Sun cannot be in opposition to Venus ever, the way astronomy goes, for example. The planets have a complication because they move at different speeds. They have retrograde motion. Over time, the precession of the Earth and precession of the orbit of planets means that over a few hundred years, these calculations have to be redefined. The Surya Siddhanta tables have to be updated, which they are not. Conventional Panchang method either let these errors stay or simply take the positions from the alumni given by Indian Statistical Institute, because it has been authorized and ordered by Government of India to create this annual alumni. Physically also, and these arguments you must have heard at a lot of places, so I'm not repeating that, the planets are so far away that they cannot affect us. Even if Mars wants to affect you at the time of your birth, it will take 15 minutes for Mars to realize that you are born, because the signal travel time from Earth to Mars is 15 minutes. And then even after Mars makes up its mind and sends the signal, it's another 15 minutes. Even for the nearest planet, the distances are half an hour for just to get a signal. There is um, no way planets can dynamically work on your birth chart. And if you assume that Mars is continuously sending out signals and therefore you catch it whenever you're born, etc., there is absolutely no evidence of these planets doing anything like that. We have tested and we have tested and we have tested, and I'll give you some examples. So the bottom line is planets move at different speeds. The constellation calculations are by different methods, and they are often internally inconsistent. And therefore, there are issues with Panchang making itself. And then there are problems, of course, of the distance of the planets from Earth, which means that the planet cannot possibly be talking to Earth. This is an example of what I mean. So this is a 2011 Sunday. This is a chart for about full moon, new moon. New moon is critical to Ramzan because the Ramzan ends when you see the new moon. And what you have here in the green color is that on this particular day, Sunday 31st July 2011, um, America and Mexico would have easily seen the appearance of the new moon, and therefore would have declared the Ramzan to be over. In the intermediate region, you needed visible. You could get visibility only if the sky was exceptionally clear and very clean. In the purple region, you would see only if you had telescopes to find the moon. And in the D region, you needed really high power telescopes to see the new moon. And in other regions, the new moon would not have been seen. So when does the Ramzan end? Does it end when South Americans can see the new moon, or does it have to wait until Indians can see the new moon? And that would change by one whole day. So where is your accuracy of talking? So the question also is, why is it not science? Science has very specific rules. Science not only predicts, but it explains and is validated by experiments. Science, the biggest issue about science is that it is falsifiable. Every time you suggest that this is how I think nature works, you should also have to say that if it does not, if you test it in this manner, it will confirm that nature works in this way. And if the test turns out to be false, then obviously my idea is wrong. Falsifiability is an integral part of astronomy or of sciences. It is not in any way true in astrology. If you go to there was a time when I used to take this TIFR bus from VT, and there was an astrologer who used to sit at the back claiming to be able to tell you your fortune. And every few days, there would be somebody coming down saying that because of your advice, I invested so many tens of thousands of rupees and lost them, and you better pay me back. And this astrologer would web some kind of a story around it and try and convince that fellow that it was not the astrologer who was wrong, but situations were slightly different, etc. And then if things didn't work, of course, he packed up and ran away. But this was a very, very regular feature for me for a long time, to see astrologers being chased by people who had predicted and gone wrong. Astrology does not give you falsifiability in any sense of the word. Astrology predicts without explaining why or how the predictions were. The explanations are completely in contrast with what we know from every other field of human learning. It's worth remembering that there is no justification for astrology in any other field of human learning. It is internally inconsistent. It is highly dependent on individual opinion and perspective. So each astrologer, depending on his vocabulary and his ability to sort of project himself or herself, will be considered more effective or less effective. All statistical tests have shown that astrological predictions are not borne out by reality. And I'll discuss several experiments with you in a minute. It is just that what happens is that when astrologers tell us a whole bunch of things, some of these things will be true by random chance. But the way our psyche is made, we will remember only the positive predictions and we'll forget the negative predictions. And therefore, over a period of time, we will start thinking that astrology is true. Every time you go to an astrologer, in case you do, and I advise you don't, but if you do, write down all the predictions that he or she has made and then check them with time. Don't go by what you remember in your mind. And the moment you systematically write down all the predictions that were made, you will see that 1 or 2 out of 10 coming true was pure chance. It was just a random number. But they build on these kind of smart talking. So it is not a science. It is not falsifiable. It is not provable. There is no logical reason why it should work. And several experiments have shown that it does not work. It is just by chance. It is just that we tend to remember good things. So we tend to remember the positive predictions of an astrologer and we forget the negative predictions of an astrologer. And that is why they seem to get credibility. So there is experiments. First, I will take Western experiment, Carlson's experiment. Carlson was a renowned did an experiment of 28 astrologers and matched 100 natal charts with the psychological profile generated by the California Psychological Inventory Test and used a double bind. So astrologers were given the natal charts or astral charts without being told who they were or at the back who they were. The experimental protocol that Carlson used was actually agreed by both physicists as valid scientific method and by astrologers saying that they are willing to go through this test and they have confidence that they can predict and the method that is being suggested is a good enough test. So there were 26 astrologers who were nominated by the National Council of Geocosmic Research in America, and 2 others stepped in because they were interested. So essentially, they had astrologers from Europe and America who claimed to be able to predict future. And it was the astrologers who helped to draw up the central proposition of how the natal chart is to be made and how it is to be tested. And the entire study was published in 1985 in Nature, and it clearly established that wherever they were true was that if you make 100 predictions, 5 or 6 or 10 are bound to come true, and the precision with which the astrologers made prediction was no better than random chance. So, for example, when you go to, you should not in India, it is banned, but if you want to know the sex of your unborn child, without doing anything, I can tell you that it's a 50% chance that it's a boy and 50% chance it's a girl, without knowing who the person is. And I can safely say that. And an astrologer will tell you that there is a 70% chance of it being a boy or a girl. He is not telling you anything astronomically significant. He is betting his chance that this 70%, if it comes true, you will remember at 100%. And if it does not come true, you will remember that he had expressed a doubt that he may not be completely right. He is simply making an ass out of you. He's just fooling you. And these studies, Carlson study is one. Narlikar did an excellent piece of work. He called Indian astrologers for a challenge. And so volunteers from Committee for Eradication of Superstition was on one side, and they collected names of teenage children rated by the children by their teachers as being bright or mentally not bright. They also collected the names of special school children who were known to be mentally handicapped. They make again 100. So they took data of 100 very bright children, 100 mentally handicapped children, mixed up their horoscopes and gave them to 27 Indian astrologers who were judging. Each of them was judging 40 horoscopes. And even in all, 200 horoscopes were given to this 27 astrologers. Again, the result showed that they were just as bad as the European astronomers, and that the astrologers essentially were pulling a fast one, and that their guesswork was no better than by chance. So Narlikar's experiment of 100 mentally retarded children and 100 exceptionally bright children mixed up their kundalis and showed it to astrologers, and the astrologers could not guess with any degree of precision as to how many children, which child was bright and which child was retarded. It was purely by chance. So 50% of the chance they would get it right. There are other works that have been done. So one of the most famous work is somebody by Anand. Rakesh Anand was an astrologer, and he was a businessman, and he used astrology to make some big investment which failed, as you can imagine. He therefore got very angry, and he prepared a horoscope of 24 celebrities and 9 personal friends, changed their names, and this was given to 101 astrologers everywhere in North India to predict their life and events. None succeeded in any given detail. For example, they predicted no political career for the horoscope of George Bush and no big money for Bill Gates. So they declared that Bill Gates' kundali was such that he would never get rich, and George Bush's kundali was such that he would never become the president of the United States. And we know both are false. He therefore concluded that astronomy is misleading and a useless superstition. In fact, he got so angry that he has created a prize of 1 million rupees or 20,000 US dollars at 20,000 US dollars at that time for any astrologer who can demonstrate that astrology works. And as you can imagine, obviously nobody has come in to accept the challenge. Clearly, astrologers know what they are doing, except that they are not telling us what they are doing. So Rakesh Anand's experiment, 100 astral charts of known famous people and their time and date and location of birth, create the charts and ask the astrologers to predict, and they can't get it right. Dean and Kelly have done another set of experiments where many astrologers attributed their success to birth chart, and they were asked to again do the same thing. They rated the consciousness of transcendent reality that, if true, might require self-assessment of present biological theory of consciousness. So if their predictions are true, then clearly consciousness was something that was got to do with planets and not what we think. And again, the test was done, again, analysis was done, and again, the astrologers were found wanting. There is not a single record of any test where the astrologers have come out to be correct. Every test that has been done has shown that astrologers are pulling a fast one on you. So this one was about astral chart and the consciousness and so on. So variety of aspects of astrological predictions, intelligence, career, psychic nature, etc., have all been tested by various people, and all of them have been found. In all these cases, it has been found that astrologers are simply fibbing. They are not making any correct predictions. Even in more recent times, I mean, I can go about the 1975 elections, and I can go where that Dhirendra Brahmachari, Indira Gandhi's astrologer, had claimed her victory, etc., and had suggested the auspicious time at which she should call for election so that she would win. She lost, and lost miserably. In modern times, with a little more than a year ago, we were told that on a particular evening, if you strike vessels in your windows, then the COVID will go away. Then later on, we were told that if we switch off all our lights and switch on only candles, then COVID will go away. We were told to light candles. We were told to switch off our lights. We were told that if you go to Kumbh Mela, the purifying effect of sunlight will make sure that you will not get COVID, and COVID will not, and therefore Kumbh Mela is completely insulated from COVID spread by the grace of God, and nothing of that sort. We still have COVID with us. We still have the second wave of COVID was so much worse than that. We know, and so clearly you should remember these things. We know with great confidence that nature is highly consistent, works through very consistent rules. And that is what science investigates and finds out. And all of them show that there is no place for astrology. So astrology has no reason, no explanation, no how, and it makes random predictions which have been told to be untrue. There is no reason to believe in astrology. And we know the rules by which nature works, and we know how nature works. I hardly need to repeat the example of our COVID predictions that were made. Earlier, several elections predictions have been made, and all of them have turned out to be true. In 1977, when Indira Gandhi called for elections after emergency, she had everything under her control. She could choose the date and time of election through astrological conjunctions. And she asked this Dharendra Brahmachari, who was eventually thrown out, to predict the date and time at which Indira Gandhi should call election. She did that and lost. And there's a suspicion that even Bengal election was called by the central government based on astrological calculations, and it did not work. Astrology does not work. But why is it so popular then? Why are people still having weekly columns of astrology and stuff like that? It's because we are all apprehensive about our futures. What will happen? How will it happen? Can I ensure this success? Can I ensure that success? Can I make sure that my wealth will go to my children when my children will be competent and will be able to look after and increase my wealth? If not, can I do some numbo jumbo, bribe the gods in order to give my children better intelligence than what they are born with or what they are trained with so that they can do a better job? So this is a very common instinct, okay? And if anybody can give us a consolation saying that, no, if this is what you do, your future will improve, or your children's life will improve, or your wealth will improve, or you won't die in near future, etc., we would be tempted to do that. But it is a temptation based on the response that you get is based on false premise. So the next question obviously is, why is the government supporting this? The first is this government has been reactive and reactionary, and they have this mortal fear that modern science and technology are Western enterprises and Indian knowledge system is being ignored in the interest of this foreign knowledge. And that gives them an inferiority complex, and therefore they want to promote the superiority of Indian knowledge system, which they think has not been studied properly because of our obsession with Western science, and that in fact Indians knew everything that the Westerners claim to know today. So the government claims that Vedic astrology is only one of the main subjects of our traditional classical knowledge system, but this is a discipline and we should try to learn more about this. This is the defense that the government has given to Supreme Court and other places. The problem that I will come up with is, I will discuss is that this is not just another knowledge system. To promote astrology is to promote something very dangerous in the society. And I'll come to that in a minute. Their hope is and their claim is that in fact Jyotisha is a very, very scientific system, except that today's astrologers have forgotten the real, genuine knowledge of how astrology should be done. And therefore, if you collect a bunch of scholars and if they can go through all the ancient documents of Jyotish Shastra, then they will come out with a correct predictive way of using astrology for predicting future. That is their bottom line hope. And therefore, they are talking about starting schools of astrology. But they conveniently forget that no major document, no respected documents of ancient Indian sciences talks about astrology as a knowledge system. No one does. The entire astrological knowledge system that has been created borrows the astronomy from respectable texts and then adds numbo jumbo of its own, which is random, and try to convince us or trying to coax us into parting with our money so that we can hear the soothsaying saying that our future will be fine and all that, and then quietly disappear when the future arrives. That is a very standard practice of astrologers. So unfortunately, this is not the first government to have this inferiority complex, and this is not the first government to try to get Vedic astrology into mainstream. The first experiment probably was in 1990s when N.T. Rama Rao, the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh at that time, introduced Jyotisha as a subject in BA class in Telugu University. Murli Manohar Joshi, the home minister under Vajpayee, tried to introduce, through back doors, Jyotish Shastra, but he called it Studies in Ancient Indian Sciences. And today, many IITs have departments of humanities and social sciences, and they are doing some excellent work in studying ancient Indian sciences. But at least Murli Manohar Joshi had the sense to not push for astrology. He tried to push for MA in astrology. There was a massive shout back on this, and eventually he withdrew and reserved himself to studying only ancient Indian sciences and some genuine like Vedang Jyotish, Surya Siddhanta, etc. We understand so well precisely because of these studies of ancient Indian sciences. And I'm myself a student of ancient Indian sciences, and there's a lot of very good science there. Unfortunately, some of them have now converted to simply doing propaganda of ancient Indian, something without fully understanding what is going on, what is not. So we have to once again raise our hand when Government of India wants to introduce BA with MA astrology in IGNOU, and soon they will try and impose it on other universities. We need to once again stop him the way we have stopped Murli Manohar Joshi earlier and N.T. Rama Rao earlier, because astrology is a very dangerous subject to teach, and I'll come to that. So I want to again emphasize 2 points before I start criticizing why astrology should not be kept in the classrooms. Is that I want to make it clear that studies of ancient knowledge system is not a bad enterprise. I am myself a student of ancient Indian knowledge systems, and there are rich collection of ideas there. Well, several IITs and other institutions are doing excellent work in Indian ancient scientists, and this is most welcome. However, astrology is a particularly dangerous subject to teach, and that is why it should not be legitimized in any way. Because astrology makes people vulnerable. If you give them a degree in astrology through a UGC recognized university, people will believe that it is the problems of amateur astrologers have been sorted out, and we actually now have a genuine astrology. We do not have a genuine astrology. It is also against the Indian Constitution. The Indian Constitution in Amendment 51 very clearly says that we must spread scientific temper, and astrology does not spread scientific temper. It allows you, it insists that you should accept the numbo jumbo that is given in the name of astrology. So it is against our constitution. It is Jyotish Vignan is dangerous, and to give legitimacy through a UGC degree means people will assume that all the false telling of other Jyotishas was simply because they were ignorant, and now we have a learned set of astrologers who will tell us the future more accurately. They will not, because genuine, honest, ancient Indian literature does not believe in Jyotish Shastra. It is a parallel side story written by people who are essentially charlatans. But just because it is written in Sanskrit doesn't mean it is respectable. The genuine, honest Sanskrit literature created by very knowledgeable astronomers like Aryabhatta and Varamira do not, by any scope, claim that astrology works. And they, in fact, don't even touch the subject of astrology. They keep completely out of it. I also want to make another distinction, which is that there is something called dharmic and there is something called dharmanda. Dharmic is somebody who is religious. And the idea of using moral principles of how to work with each other and how to respect fellow human beings, and if you wish, even pay homage to the superior force that has created the nature, is a question of personal choice. One can argue about religion, one can argue against religion, but it is intrinsically not harmful in the sense that it will not mislead you. On the other hand, those who are dharmanda, who are blinded by what the religion says, are going to be misled by religion. The example that I want to quote is from today's newspaper, where RSS head has made it very clear that lynching in the name of Hindutva is not Hindutva. He makes it very clear that those who lynch people of other religions using Hindu Dharma as their name are dharmandas. They are not genuine dharmic people, and their act should only be condemned. This is said by RSS chief in newspapers today. Please read Today's Times of India in case you have missed the story. So dharmic and dharmand are two different things. To believe that system is ultimate truth, etc., and we should blindly follow whatever it says is a very dangerous thing to it. There are aspects of religion which you can argue about, but to be blind is essential to be enslaved by people who will manipulate you in the name of religion. And democracy requires that every individual human being thinks for himself. Every Indian citizen has a responsibility to think for himself or herself and look at all the facts before making an opinion. Dharmandata is against democracy, Dharmandata is against our constitution, and it is against natural human instincts. It is morally unacceptable completely in every sense of the word. Those devout Hindus do not believe in astrology, and those who believe in astrology are not necessarily devout Hindus. You must remember that astrology is a knowledge system which just happens to be written in the same language as the uh, Hindu literature is written, which is Sanskrit. But that doesn't mean that the two are related. The two are not related. None of the classical texts of Hindu religion will tell you will talk about astrology or predicting future. Even Vedang Jyotish, as a part of Vedas, does not talk about predicting future, and no one does any of the Vedas or any of the Upanishads or etc. talk about uh, astrology as being legitimate. It is not. Just because it is in Sanskrit, do not associate it with Hinduism. I've studied Hinduism and I'm very impressed with the ideas that exist in Hinduism. And to sully it, to say that astrology is part of Hinduism is an injustice to Hinduism. Astrology is a parallel, self-proclaimed Hippocratic knowledge system, and it has nothing to do with Hinduism. There is no such thing as Hindu astrology. There is something called Indian astrology, but it is not in any way related to the religion of Hinduism. Do not make that mistake. So you are welcome to be dharmic. It's a question of personal choice. But please do not be dharmanda. Don't become blinded by just because something is written in Sanskrit. Do not assume that it has the legitimacy or blessing of Hindu religion. Hindu religious texts do not talk of astrology in any form. Not even as late as 15th century AD, Surya Siddhanta talks about predicting the future. It is a Yavana import into India, which has simply been then exploited by some people who saw a quick way of making money, and they just happen to have written it down in Sanskrit, which is the same language in which the Vedic literature is written. But the two are not connected with each other, the two are not related with each other, and they should not be mixed. There is no Hindu Jyotish Shastra. There is Jyotish Shastra that is prevalent in some part of India, and Hinduism is prevalent in India. But they are just because of they are physically coincident doesn't mean they are related. They are not related. So astrology, for example, I mean, there are trivial logical argument. If astrology is correct and everything that I do is dictated by stars, then where is the free will? I have no free will. And if every action of my free will is my action is predestined, then I really am not responsible for any of my actions. There is no free will. So if I go and murder somebody, I should not be punished for it simply because I mean it was predestined in my destiny that I would kill somebody, because that is how the planetary positions were. So like in Oh My God, you have to go and sue the planets if I go and murder somebody. Why should there be any kind of punishment for a human being for any crime he or she commits? Because everything is done by the planets, and therefore we are not responsible for who we are, what we are. And therefore there is, because the very concept of free will does not exist in astrology, and therefore there is no question of having any kind of legal system, etc. You essentially have anarchy. Whatever planets have told people, different people to do, they will do, and you just have to learn to live with it. And that is so blatantly obviously silly, and so blatantly obviously even the government of present government will not recommend that. So, astrology should not be taught in school because it is dangerous. First of all, by the 51st Amendment of the Constitution, it is illegal. Second thing is, astrology can be used to misdirect people and can exploit people's vulnerability. Astrology is definitely not in a, any test of astrology will tell you that it is not capable of telling the future. And therefore, to give it in the hands of some to exploit the others is a dereliction of government's duty. Government should be working against astrology, not in favor of astrology. And there is no great knowledge of astrology which is today lacking, which somehow will be found by a bunch of Sanskrit put together by IGNU or whatever it is. Sanskritists are different from religious people. Again, I want to emphasize that. So astrology should not be encouraged. Astrology should be discouraged, and it should definitely not be given legitimacy of a university degree, because otherwise people will take it more seriously than they do. So all in all, my message is that as it is astrology is bad, as it is astrology is dangerous, but to give it a veneer of respectability by giving a university degree in it is positively dangerous and will lead to hundreds of thousands of people being exploited by some charlatans who claim to have a legitimate degree from a university, because there is no great Vedic knowledge of Sanskrit. Vedas and Hindu religious literature does not talk about astrology. So how much ever you may dig in whatever Upanishads or Aranyak you want to read, you will not find references to astrology, because astrology, just because it is written in Sanskrit, is not Hinduism. And to tell some people that they have learned astrology through a university degree and therefore they can go and predict future of people who are vulnerable is morally unacceptable. The bottom line is astrology is unscientific about the claims that it makes. It is provably wrong and dangerous. It works on human fears and of the future. Every statistical test has shown that astrology does not work. Um, and if your memory tells you that it works because of such and such an example, remember that our memories tend to be biased and we only remember good things. How many of us really remember that we were asked to bang Bartan or bang thalis at the beginning of COVID so that COVID would go away? We have forgotten that. So bad memories or failed astrological predictions, we forget. How many of us remember that Swami Dhirendra Brahmachari gave completely wrong advice to Indira Gandhi and she lost the election miserably in 1977? We don't, because we also only remember good events. So it is a play of our memory. If you think it is your memories that is telling you about the astrology being correct, go to an astrologer, write down all the predictions he or she is making, and then make a test. Do the test of the kind that Narlikar and others have done. So astrology is a way of exploiting the vulnerability of people who are under false pretext. And in fact, it should be illegal. It should not be legitimized. Just because some recent text written in Sanskrit and use some of the principles of science to claim legitimacy, that does not make them legitimate. It is against our constitution to encourage astrology and the false belief system that comes with it. All in all, therefore, to believe in astrology is to believe in untruths, and to think that it is Hindu is an injustice to Hinduism, and to think that it is a knowledge system is to do injustice to human intelligence. There is no way in which you should accept that. For those of you who want more detailed argument about how astrology claims connections between planets and what are the connections and combinations that work very well, there's a beautiful book written by Balachandra Rao. It's called Astrology, Believe It or Not. On Amazon, it is currently not available, but I'm sure it is available somewhere. So there he discusses in detail how kundlis are made, how astrology is done, what are the good combinations, what are the bad combinations, what are the tests that have been done in astronomy on astrologers which have failed, and why it should not be believed. So if you want more information, you can ask me, of course, just now, but otherwise I would suggest that you look at this little pocket book of Balchandra Rao, which discusses everything in very great detail. And a fair amount of my talk actually is taken from that book. Thank you very much for listening to me. But there is no Marathi for that. Okay. So
Yeah.
I've said what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now we can be open to discussion.
There is very little time, in fact, just 15 minutes for this, but I will read out the questions to you. Okay. And I hope you have convinced everybody that by, accepting, giving legitimacy to astrology, we are in fact insulting the ancient knowledge system for whatever it was worth. We are really insulting it. There are compliments for your talk, and the first question was, sir, then all the 4 Vedas that were written in ancient times are based on astrology or astronomy? No.
None of the 4 Vedas have astrology in it anyway. There is no prediction. In fact, Vedas do not even have Rashis, and they do not have planets. The Vedic people were great poets, great imaginative creators about human relation to the world and the discussion between humans and connections, etc. But and there, for example, if you read Tilak, he makes a case that some of the poems that are written in Rigved probably refer to some kind of combinations in sky. So he claims that Taurus, etc., is there, but they do not in any time anywhere directly or indirectly claim that those planets they did not know. At the most, some stellar combination Tilak claims they knew. So if you read his Orion or Arctic Home of Vedas, you will see that.
In fact, there is a question about Tilak, whether he believed or whether he has mentioned astrology. So no, he hasn't.
He hasn't. Tilak has done beautiful work on Vedic astronomy. His Orion and his the Arctic Home of Vedas are beautiful examples of a scientifically analyzed book. It is something that should be read, and I understood how good Tilak was, not from my history books, but by reading Orion. That man was a brilliant man. The way he sits and analyzes and honestly places his opinion. Even he himself says that while I am interpreting this way, there are these doubts in my interpretation. So please make up your own mind. It is absolutely a brilliant piece of work. So there is none of the Vedas have astrology in that. Please. Yes.
Yes, we will try to share the slides with you. Yes. Maybe we have everybody's email ID, so we can share the 2 sets of slides with you.
Sure.
And because that you can use as a tool, because you have to talk about this. You have to talk to people who still believe in astrology, Muhurta and Kundli and everything that comes through it. This is an important message. Thank you, sir. Very convincing and scientific. Ramani is asking, okay, so like sir said, when astrologers figure out some error in the Kundali, they end up suggesting some fix for it, which is a hoax and nothing is true. In the same way, is aura healing actually a thing? Exactly. Aura healing, Reiki, pranic healing, numerology is all various ways of humbug for charlatans.
Yeah, tarot cards and all kinds of things.
Yes. Because people in that field simply tell us if we need some sort of healing or chakras, etc. So whatever that field is it actually true or factual? No, it is not. It is definitely not scientific. It is, again, they are, because you are in some kind of a fix, they want to make use of it. They want to exploit your gullibility. Next is, what about numerology? There, numerology also comes. It may not be science, but still used widely. All these nonsensical things are used widely, isn't it, Mayank?
Yes. There is, for example, an amusing story which my brother has pointed out. When he was 16-year-old, he wanted to go for medicine, and my mother was very worried whether he will go for get medicine admission or not. So she would show his kundli to all kinds of pandits. And one of the pandits came forward and said, "Don't worry about your son going to become doctor or not, because on 3rd June, on his 16th birthday, he's going to die." And obviously my entire family went into panic and stuff like that, and said that the 3rd of June came and went without any event. Today he's 71 years old. He became a medical doctor of repute, and he became a psychiatrist and internationally recognized doctor. He has 2 children, one of whom is also a psychiatrist, and the other one is a biotechnologist, and everybody is living happily ever after. So the event that was predicted to happen on his 16th birthday is still waiting to happen. Then
Typically,
there
the
are
two parts of you were saying something? Please.
no, go ahead.
There are two parts of astrology exercise. One is prediction, and second is doing something to fix bad things which are projected by astrologer. Even if we assume just for sorry, I missed it. Even if we assume just for the theoretical sake of it, that the prediction of the astrologer is correct, no one seems to wonder how someone's bad fortune, as ordered by Saturn or Mars, can get fixed or softened by performing a certain ritual. Nobody wonders. Questions are not to be asked.
Somebody has asked. Somebody asked about how ancient astronomers calculated eclipses, etc. I don't have time to go through it, but if you join, I am giving a course on ancient Indian astronomy, and next week, not next week, archaeoastronomy. At that time, we will talk about how these calculations are done for astronomy. It's a completely scientific method and easy to do.
Anand Devuskar's question was pretty long. Would such headstrong planet accept a request by some individual? Can a small havan or some donation fix anyone's fate? Yes, he can, Try it. Give your money away. It's like that. Okay. I have this book from Balchandra sir. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, somebody else.
So an astrologer had predicted my death on 16th. Oh, Vihangji is here. Okay. Hello, Dr. Vihang. Good. Just now he mentioned it. Good to have you with us still. Please share the PPT and also to YouTube link on our email IDs, which you have already with you. Yes, we will do that. We will definitely do that, Satish.
Another astrologer had predicted that my mother would have 7 children. And I can assure you, we are just me and my brother.
Good for her.
And it was quite funny because my mother did not tell us about this prediction until she had to have her uterus removed for fear of cancer. And then she came home and said, you know what? The astrologer was wrong. He said, I would have 7 children. There is no way I can have a 3rd child now.
You know what? When we were to get married, me and Dhananjay, and it had to match, the kundlis had to match. Exactly. But his mother was so clever. She said, get her kundli, whatever it is, and I will get a fix for you.
Exactly.
And that was done.
Exactly.
Sir, how our ancient experts used to do calculations and predict eclipses on a separate note.
That's a very simple thing to do.
Mahakumbh is linked with Jupiter's 12-year cycle, so was all these things calculated.
By the way, do look up the story that came up. Apparently, the Jupiter cycle meant that Mahakumbh should have been done next year, but it was advanced by 1 year because some other planetary conjunction that Chief Minister thought was better. So he convinced the government to hold the Kumbh Mela 1 year in advance, according to the last date. And if you had 11 years after that, the Kumbh Mela should have been in 2022. It was held in 2021 because some completely different planetary conjunctions they thought would be very auspicious to them. It has killed 1 million Hindus by COVID. That's all it has done.
Yeah, so, it was in Desh ki Kundli, population reduction ho jayega.
Bilkul.
So Manasi is asking a very pointed question. So should astrology as a study be completely scrapped, or to what level it should be taught? I mean, should Kundali making and Panchang be considered legitimate and taught and practiced? Panchang is different.
Yeah, I mean, Kundli you can ask people to make their Kundlis if they are amused about it, but it is of no use.
Yeah.
It should not be used. It should not be shown to somebody who will interpret it for you.
We still have to reach that stage where we will, ban all these things or,
Exactly.
discard them. Right now we are at a stage where we are introducing it into university systems.
Correct,
So
correct.
what to say?
And UGC recognized university will give you a degree in astronomy. That is just not astrology. That is just not acceptable.
Not acceptable. This is all the, the majority.
Correct.
And Samir is saying Humayun believed in astrology, yet he died while watching Venus early morning and fell from stairs. Yes. Funny things happen. Next question. Is this lecture is helpful as a weapon for argument against astrology as science? Thanks. So then why do they claim something with respect to aura when they thermally scan a person to what they say aura scanning?
No, you can use thermal camera to give me a thermal image of myself, but the word aura has completely different or connotation. I mean, thermal temperature is entirely my body temperature, and everybody will have the same thermal profile because we are roughly 37 degrees, and our brain is slightly warmer than our extremities and so on. But that does not give me any extraordinary powers. Aura means I have some extraordinary powers. All human profiles will be almost similar. Exactly. All human profiles will be more or less the same. Our brains and our stomach, the chest part will show higher temperature and our limbs will show lower temperature. This will be true for everybody. Nobody has an aura.
Your face reading, palmistry, your everything, you start putting questions to all these things.
Correct.
Whether and how it will work. That's it.
Correct.
What is the basis of Kundli when astrologers also dare to predict future of cities, countries, and the whole world too? This actually sounds so funny. It is. Yeah. This is in fact a comment, not a question. Let's go further.
Somebody is talking about Chinese zodiacs.
Can you read that? Because
I think does Chinese zodiac have the same as Western? The zodiacal divisions are something that human beings finalized in 3000 BC in Sumeria. So Sumerians were good at measuring the movement of sun, etc. And while Indians were obsessed with moon and came out with the nakshatras, the Sumerians came out with rashis and the zodiacal signs, and they are more or less accepted by all knowledge systems as the knowledge was extended. There would be subtle differences in terms of the shape because the planet constellations look different. So the same Orion is looked as a hunter in one place, is looked as a tortoise in another place, is looked at as a boat in another place, etc. So those variants are there. So the shapes that they see we associated with stars, but the division of the zodiacal belt into the 12 zodiacs is more or less something that everybody accepts with minor differences.
G has asked one question. G, I would advise you, aura cannot be scanned. Thermal camera is used to identify the thermal temperature of the body. That is fine. But well, since you are here, I would advise you, please leave all these pranic healing, aura, etc., etc. Concentrate on your work, your own capabilities, build them up, and go forward. You don't need astrology or palmistry or aura. Nothing. Nothing can be. Nothing will be needed once you go dedicatedly after your own potential. One of the important lines in my wife's biodata that we received when arranging my marriage was, we are not interested in seeing Kundli. Very good. Good for you, Mandar. Mahesh is, I'm somehow missing.
No, Ankur says that, look, some astrologers even predict just for free. Basically, and therefore they cannot be money-minded. Basically, they may not be wanting the currency of money, but they want currency of respectability.
Attention and respect.
Attention and respectability. So the currency requirements change, but the purpose does not change.
Mahesh is going, if astrology to be taught for the sake of history, why not teach black magic and human sacrifice rituals? Yes. In Africa, that should happen. Oh, no, here also it should happen. Yes.
Yeah.
And well.
Oh, we periodically hear about police having caught some Baba for human sacrifice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It happens in India. Why? It happens in suburbs of Mumbai.
It has happened already.
Yeah.
So many times. Chinese question you have already taken by Aryan. Ankur's question also you have taken.
That also taken. As far as I can see,
I think everything is done because I stopped the questions now. It's already the time is up, 8:30. Exactly at 8:30 we have stopped. We will definitely share all the slides with you on your email. And I would once again like to tell you, this is a very interesting course we are offering you by Professor Mayank Vahia, and that is on archaeoastronomy. He starts from the Burja home, how those people, ancients, depicted the supernova explosion and many other things. He also talks about tribal astronomy, yeah, myths and architecture. There are so many interesting things. You should really, really use it. And our diploma is coming up. Oh, there is our star cast. Professor Vahia, Shekchi, Mahesh is here. Rishikesh, Vinita Navalkar, Abhay Deshpande will be there. Shishir Deshmukh will be here. And this is a properly structured course. There will be written exam also. And COVID permitting, we will be taking you out for a field trip, sky observations also. But this is really, really a good course. And I advise you to spread the word among students, among science students who are interested in astronomy, observational astronomy, or theoretical astrophysics too. This is a good grounding you can do. This is one more free lecture coming up on July 11th. It's a Sunday. It's going to be in the morning because the professor is from USA. And he is going to talk about defined Sanskrit. Everybody, here, it's called Devavani. And he is going to talk about the cultural authoritative force that Sanskrit works as. It's a different take on Sanskrit. Our Sanskrit course is also coming up. And do you have the poster for it? As if you have to learn ancient sciences and arts from India, you have to know Sanskrit and other languages also, Pali, etc. But definitely Sanskrit. So we are going to teach in a different manner. Like, it's not the how typically they teach in a slightly boring manner. We have devised something different. We will be making use of different texts, not just the Subhashitam or Bhagavad Gita or any other religious texts. We are going to make use of the poetry by Bhavabhuti, Kalidasa, and such. So if you're interested, I'm sorry the poster is not shared, but you will definitely find all the details on all these our social media pages. Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. Please, if you want to ask for anything, any details of these courses, please write to us on this email ID, mrsentrust@gmail.com. Thank you, Dr. Vahia. It was wonderful journey, and though it's like I know so many things, but to hear it from you in such a disciplined, structured, academic manner, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.